This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Most organizations look at innovation as the process to come up with new products and new services. In some cases, organizations may be focused on maybe just incremental innovation. But in many organizations, they look to the innovation efforts to come up with something that is going to differentiate, that's going to disrupt, that's going to change the marketplace. Now, that is a correct definition, I would think. But the question really is how do you achieve innovation success? Simply saying the words is one thing, achieving success, completely different. So, for instance, all the years I was CTO at Hewlett-Packard, one of the areas that we focused a lot of energy on was what should we add in the next version of our hot-selling laptops. Now, at that time, we were selling 40 million laptops a year. We were the largest distributor, manufacturer, designer, developer of laptops in the world. And so the question became, what's the new thing? Each year, what would be the new feature set at your top of the line, best-selling, hottest product? How do you make that happen? What are the new features you're going to put into it? Now, people will say, well, whatever was working this year, maybe just make it 10% better or, try something maybe a little different. Challenge being is that when you look at product cycles in the high-tech world, consumer electronics world, in many cases, you are wrapping up the design of your products before the current products are in their hot selling season for you to know which feature or function really drove sales with consumers. So, for instance, in the case of consumer electronics like desktops and laptops, there are certain seasonal selling cycles. Obviously, holidays being a big one for that. Between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Other times would include what we call dads and grads. The cycle at the May-June time frame is people giving laptop devices as graduation gifts for kids going away to college would be another example. But with that timing, you have to guess as to what the next product or next feature set is before you could even validate this year's feature set, because you have to have a cycle that allows you to wrap it up in time in order to get into manufacturing in the late summer, early fall, so that you can produce a large volume of laptops and have them on the shelf ready for Thanksgiving, Black Friday. So that cycle causes you to have to constantly be asking yourself, what are those new products? What are those new features? And there's the obvious things, maybe improving the quality or feel of a touchpad on a keyboard, or maybe a bigger screen, or maybe a smaller screen. Maybe it's better audio. Maybe you make the laptop out of a different set of materials. Recently HP came out with a laptop case made out of leather, so you get that smell and feel like you're sitting in a car. So the real question that I always struggled with at HP was, is there a better way? Is there a better way to cause yourself or trigger yourself to go beyond just kind of, these little, touches, touchpads and bigger screens and et cetera? What would be the approach to really unlock our thinking to then drive a possibility of an innovation that could be a real differentiator? So there was what I would call a catalyst project, a project that I'd been working on for years during my years at HP, and that was around getting the mobile team. This is the team that originally was focused on the iPac and then ultimately became the Palm team after we did the Palm acquisition. And that was to find a solution to battery life. Battery life is a nightmare. We needed batteries that charged faster, that had a longer life, and that were safer. If you recall back in the, I'm going to say 09, 2010, 2011 timeframe, we had the lithium-ion battery fires. Thank God HP did not have that, but some of our competitors did with battery fires in mobile phones and in laptops. And how do you increase the capacity of batteries? How do you increase the life of batteries? Speed up the charging and make them incredibly safe. Now, if you go back and you look at battery life only improves about 10% a year. That's right. So power density, the amount of power stored in a cubic centimeter of material, the actual shape of the battery, it only improves about 10% a year. Now that compared to Moore's Law. So you've got this compute technology, your mobile phone, your laptop, your desktop, it's doubling every 18 months. Doubling in 18 months. Your power density is only improving about 10% a year. So you've got a Moore's Law situation where the requirement for additional compute is far outstripping the traditional battery technology. Now, battery is really a chemistry problem. Battery design has not fundamentally changed since they were invented. Now, today, in most what I would call higher-end consumer electronics, we all have lithium-ion batteries. Those are the batteries that are in most modern laptops. It's the battery that's inside your iPhone, your Android phone, your whatever phone you're out there. They're lithium-ion batteries. They charge really well. They have a longer life. You get all the benefits. Lithium-ion, however, can be dangerous, so safety does become an issue. Some new batteries that are being worked on is lithium oxygen, which does give an increased storage capacity in the battery itself. But we still needed a breakthrough. The fact of the matter is chemistry cannot move fast enough. Lithium-ion, lithium oxygen, there's all kinds of different materials that are being tried out in batteries. And that is, again, the fundamental design of a battery has not changed, just the chemicals used, the materials used in the constructing of a battery. But a fundamental battery, whether it's your typical AA battery you're putting into your kid's game, to the battery in your laptop, to the battery in your car, to the batteries now being developed by Elon Musk as part of the going into the Teslas. The fundamental design of a battery has not changed. It's just the chemistry. Now, while we've seen a lot of power improvements, face it, laptop, mobile phones, they do last longer. They're not from the battery. From everything else, that really comes from everything else in the device. We have more power-efficient components like hard drives, screens. We have a smarter operating system, whether it be iOS on Apple or Android for your mobile phone or Windows on a laptop. It's smarter. It knows when to power things down, not to spin up the hard drive or turn the screen off to save and conserve power. So while we've seen, now, I've got a laptop that can go, 17, 18 hours on a battery. It's not from the battery. It's from all of the other components around it. So back to the point. We still needed a breakthrough, a disruptive set of ideas. And this Catalyst project is one that had been dogging me for years as the CTO at Hewlett-Packard. And what I ended up finding out is I needed to totally transform the perspective, transform how everybody on the team looked and viewed and perceived both the opportunity and the problem. I needed to change the context. I needed to change that perspective. So the question became how would you define the need? How would you define the problem to get that different perspective? So think about it. We've been talking about how to improve a battery. If that was the innovation challenge for your product or your service, and we were just going at it by looking at, the traditional set of feature components in order to try to innovate to improve, how would you define the need? How would you define the problem to get a different perspective? You got an idea? You got a thought? Think about that just for a second. You have to transform and get the team to think differently. So what was the question that unlocked the ideas for us that were never considered before? I'll share that right after the break. So what was it that unlocked the ideas that we never considered before? The team was tasked with trying to improve the battery. What was it that unlocked the ideas never before considered to solve the battery problem? The magic leap was in changing the challenge. The challenge was, how can we improve batteries, to how can we improve portable power? Now, it may not sound like much, but it caused a seismic shift in the thinking. Just by changing the problem from how can we improve batteries to how can we improve portable power. Battery improvement is a feature innovation. Portable power is a function innovation. That simple shift from feature to function is what unlocked a flood, and I mean an absolute flood of ideas. The result was a shift and an increase in the quality and the quantity of the ideas. So what was the result? What did we experience? Well, one is we had all kinds of ideas that looked at the fact that it wasn't about batteries. It was about the desire for people to carry their power with them, to always have power available, to have a way to run the electronics that they needed to run in such a way that they could be productive without needing to feel stressed or challenged or looking for where they could plug in to recharge, or getting half of a job done and all of a sudden having their device no longer be able to be powered up. But that fundamental shift was not about batteries, but how do we think about portable power and what kind of innovations could we come up with? And we experimented with a large number of these ideas. And I bet you we did hundreds of different experiments. We funded a bunch of universities. At that time, we funded probably 180, 190 universities around the world. We put out an RFP, request for proposal from universities with this new challenge. Not about how to improve batteries, but how to think and improve in concepts about increasing or improving the ability of portable power. And the universities came back with a number of crazy, in some cases, and many great ideas. We actually did a number of joint ideas with universities where we hosted joint ideation workshops. We worked with them. We crafted challenge statements around portable power. We investigated state-of-the-art sciences that were in the broader context of batteries, but in portable power. And we unleashed these teams to come up with entirely new, entirely crazy kinds of ideas. Now, in the case of this one fundamental shift, we came up with one proof of concept that actually turned into a product. One POC was a co-innovation effort with Toshiba. And Toshiba had been looking at kind of a similar kind of a challenge. When they heard us talk about this challenge in the context of portable power, not batteries, their research team hopped on it in a big way. Now, they had not quite quantified the way to describe it as the way we did it in the context of portable power, but soon as we challenged them with that statement, it clicked, it connected. And so what was it that Toshiba was proposing? It was around some work that they had been doing in their lab around a methanol fuel cell. Now, a methanol fuel cell is you use a chemical process with a catalyst and methanol. It generates electricity and it has some byproducts. In this case with Toshiba, we actually created a proof of concept, which was a fuel cell that replaced the battery on the back of an iPack. Now, for those of you who don't know what an iPack is, it was the PDA device created by Compaq, which was acquired by HP, and it had a removable battery on the back of this PDA device, and on the back you could create what we used to call humpbacks or camelback batteries. So you could take the cover off the back, you could slap a battery on that was bigger and thicker and had a little hump that stuck out the back of the device, and you would get a longer battery life. Well, because it supported that with more traditional, nickel metal batteries, which was the top of the line batteries at that time, we created a fuel cell that stuck out the back and slapped it into the iPack, and that's what we did as a proof of concept. And it worked great. It was very, very efficient. It was refillable, so you could literally put methanol in it and keep it going. You didn't have to plug it in to charge it. It got refueled by adding methanol to the little reservoir in the fuel cell. And that was a great experiment. Now, there are some byproducts. When you think about fuel cells, there's a couple of things that come out, which is water vapor and carbon dioxide. Now, the carbon dioxide, not a problem. Water vapor can be a problem because water around electronics, not a good thing. But we designed around it and solved it and worked it, and it came out what I thought was a pretty interesting solution. Now, we decided not to go forward with that, and there was a bunch of other work going on. But we actually encouraged Toshiba to do something along the lines of these methanol fuel cell ideas. And so what they did is they came out with a methanol fuel cell that would turn into a USB charger. So this methanol fuel cell would power itself off of methanol, did not require to be plugged into a wall. It was a complete standalone unit. And you would just simply plug in your USB devices. It would charge your phone and charge your camera and whatever other devices you had. It was released in October of 2009. It was a USB charger. It sold for $328 US, and it refueled with these little 50 milliliter little bottles of methanol. And that was an interesting kind of concept. So, but again, the byproducts, slight amount of water vapor and carbon dioxide. So this is just one example of transforming, in this case, going from how do you improve batteries to how can you improve portable power that generated transformative ideas. And this methanol USB charger was just one example of some of the ideas and thinking that was radically different from anything that we had within these teams. So how do you apply function innovation to what you're doing? We'll talk about that right after the break. So how do you apply this shift from feature innovation to function innovation into what it is you are trying to do? Well, it breaks down really to 4 steps. And let me walk you through that, and then we'll actually talk through some more examples. So step 1, define the product or service you are focused on. Define what it is that your innovation effort is focused on. So for example, in the example I used in the last segment, it was high-end laptops. So your top of the line, best selling product or service, in the case at HP, this set of laptops. Step 2, describe its features, what it does. So the features could be 17-inch screen, Intel i9 processor, a keyboard. And then what feature innovations are you thinking about in the next version? Oh, I don't know, maybe a DreamColor screen. And if you're not familiar with what a DreamColor screen is, go online, do a Google search. And if you're into graphics and arts and animation and gaming and all that, you will want a DreamColor screen. So it could be a DreamColor screen on a laptop, a GPU, or something else. So step 2 is really about breaking out and defining the current features and the features you're thinking about adding into it. Now step 3, and this is the hard step back and describe the core function of the product or service. Describe that core function. The product is a high-end laptop. Its features are things like 17-inch screens and Intel i9 processors. But what is the core base function of that device? Well, the best way I can describe it is it's around portable compute. The ability to take compute capabilities with you as you move about. Portable compute. Now, there may be many different ways you could define the function. So, for example, is it portable compute? Or other examples such as, it's a digital file cabinet, or it's a digital photo shoebox. Whatever the use is for it, you need to figure out a way to get it down into the most fundamental core function. Not the features, but back off on what's the function of that device. And then you need to ask yourself how you could perform or enable the function. So if I said that the function was portable compute, what would be just some quick ideas you could come up with how I could deliver portable compute in a different way? I could do it by a mobile phone. I could do it by a thin client device where the laptop is virtualized. It's sitting in the cloud. It's not actually a device that I carry with me. There's a lot of different ways to describe portable compute. But when you define the function, it's not about what features am I going to add to this laptop to make it a win. The question is how do I think about portable compute? And is there a different way to think about portable compute that will be a game-changing, disruptive, breakthrough idea that transforms your positioning in the marketplace? Now, let's get out of the electronics world, right? I know I kind of get hung up on it sometimes just because it's what I know best. I spent so many years designing and developing and working with teams to create great products that went on retail shelves that people bought and are still used by hundreds of millions of people around the world. Let's give a more practical, more, different kind of an example that doesn't look at it for any kind of electronics, let's say. So if I tasked you to innovate a cup, I want you to innovate and come up with a cup. Now, there's a lot of ways to think about that. Is it a coffee cup? Is it a tea cup? Is it a Yeti-like cup? And what I mean by a Yeti cup are those vacuum aluminum cups that keep your drinks hot or keep them cold for long periods. So what I would call a higher tech version of a cup. Is it a sippy cup? I'm a grandfather. What can I say? I deal a lot with sippy cups with my young grandchildren. So what would you do? What would be the design? Is it size? Do I make a bigger cup, a smaller cup, a lighter weight cup, a cup that can withstand being dropped and not broken, a cup with a lid, so if I gave it to my grandkids, they don't spill their grape juice all over the white carpeting in the living room. How many different ways could you innovate a cup? What would be the feature set that you would add to that cup in order to make it a great cup, right? And there's lots, artwork and colors and, print a photograph of my grandkids onto the coffee cup. That would be great. A big mug that takes you 2 hands to hold it so you can warm your hands. Cups that change color because of temperature, right? What ways would you innovate if I told you your task is to innovate a cup? Okay, so think about that. Now, however, if I changed that request from how do you innovate a cup to instead ask you, how would you innovate a way to carry liquids? Now, what are you thinking about? How do you innovate a way to carry liquids? What different ways could you think of? You could use a hose, cup your hands. You could put the liquid in your mouth, carry it in your mouth. You could put it into a sponge and carry that across and carry it with you and squeeze the liquid out of a sponge. What other ways would you innovate if I asked you to innovate a way to carry liquids? So how many ways did you come up with? Now here's a challenge. You could treat this as a homework assignment. Sit down and come up with how many different ways you would innovate a way to carry liquids. And then post them over at the innovators.community. That's the free community. It's where listeners of the show hang out. It's where I hang out. It's where we continue the conversation after the show each week. So here's your task for this week. How many different ways could you innovate a way to carry liquids? And think about it in context as being different when the task was, how do you innovate a cup? It's not about a cup. It's about carrying liquid. What does a cup do? We talked about features of size, weight, thickness, keeping temperature, the liquid hot or keeping the liquid cold. Those are all features. The function is it carries liquid. So the task is how many different ways could you innovate the way to carry liquid? And post them over at the innovators.community. And I'd love to hear what your ideas are. I gave you a couple of them. Cup your hands, use your mouth, use a sponge. But I'm sure there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of different ways to think about how do you carry liquids. But that simple shift from a feature, innovate a cup, to a function, innovate a way to carry liquid, shifts your perspective. And it results in ideas that typically do not come up in any previous brainstorming session. I could only imagine what a brainstorming session at Yeti looks like when it comes to innovating cups. You go, I don't know, I was just in Ace Hardware, not too far from my house here in Colorado, looking at Yeti cups, and now they've got these Mongo huge, absolutely, takes 2 hands to hold them, kind of buckets almost, down to little bitty coffee cups. They come with lids, so they in some cases have taken the concept of a sippy cup from a kid and made a sippy cup for an adult, right? But those are all features. The function is to carry liquid. If your challenge is to think of new ways to carry liquid, what would those ideas be? And that is radically different. It's causing us to step back and look at the problem differently. Because as soon as you say, innovate a cup, I've pointed you down the path of an answer. And you're thinking about it in the context of the features you can add to a cup. Step back, not looking at it as a cup, but what is the function of that cup? Carrying liquid. How many different ways can you think about coming up with that? And again, just that little shift from feature to function changes that perspective. Don't go anywhere. We'll have more on this when we come back. After this break, you're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network. Function innovation can be applied to anything: product, services, business model, internal operations, and it can be assigned and used in any organization: small startups, large multinationals, governments, NGOs, nonprofits, you name it. This approach to looking at features, backing up, looking at function, and innovate the function. Define a problem around the function, which then opens up possibilities, transforms the context. It's not about innovating a cup, it's innovating the way you carry liquids. That causes people to think differently, and you will experience a radical increase in the number and quality of ideas. But do not be fooled. It is harder than it looks. Being able to identify and describe the function in such a way as to unlock the range of possible ideas is hard. You do need to step back and think about it, and then use it in the context of saying, will this description of a function cause us to think about something differently? It's not about batteries, it's about portable power. It's not about a cup, it's about how you transport liquid. That simple transformation of that description and putting the challenge around the function, that's what unlocks a whole new set of possibilities for coming up with an entirely new set of ideas. Now, here's the challenge. This is why this is so hard. Our human nature is we want to jump to the feature. I want to put in, a bigger hard drive in a laptop. I want a bigger cup so I don't have to go back into the kitchen and refill it as often. I want a cup that won't spill, whatever it is, right? We jump to the feature rather than stepping back and thinking about the function. So catch yourself. If you're working on brainstorming ideas with your team and people are sitting there going through the feature set, think about how you can apply the function approach to that to see about unlocking ideas that you would have never experienced or expected. So here's an approach that I've used thousands of times. And this is an approach I use quite regularly historically we're doing product development, where I had a previous generation of a product and we're working on a new next generation version of the product. So in this case, I would take each feature, for example, a 2 terabyte hard drive going into a laptop. I would step back and decide the function for that feature. So what's the function of a 2 terabyte hard drive? It's reliable mobile data storage, right? People don't want to lose their data and they want to be able to take it with them. So it's reliable mobile data storage. So now innovate that function. It's not about the feature set, because in this case, most people would simply say, if it was 2 terabytes last year, it needs to be 3 terabytes next year, and that's the enhancement. Think about it differently. It's about reliable mobile data storage. So innovate that function. An idea that we came up with, this is even back in 2009 and 2010, was solid state. No moving parts. It actually increased the reliability of the data stored on it. You could not have a mechanical failure. It also had the benefit of using less power. So the idea, the innovation of that function was to create a hard drive, solid state, and that was the innovation that we came up with. Now I go back and I repeat it for each and every feature. Feature, screen, right? Hard drive, keyboard, compute, battery life, portability, size, material. Go through every feature, step back, define the function, and then innovate that function. Then the last step is then combining all of these functions that you've just innovated together to create an entirely new product. So take each feature, step back, define the function, innovate the function, combine all those functions together for a product that may have 5, 8, 10 features. You now have 5, 8, 10 functions that you've innovated. Combine those functions into a new product. Those are the kinds of products that will be game changers, that will drive long-term success. That was one of the secrets we did at HP, which took us from number 3, number 4 in the marketplace to becoming the number 1 tech company in the world with the number 1 market share in our laptops, desktops, all of our compute platforms. Was going through this process of feature innovation to function innovation. This was one of those key secrets. So try it. Take an existing product or service of yours and apply it to the ideas that came from one of your brainstorming exercises. Take each idea from the brainstorm, ask what is its core function, then ideate new ideas based on that core function. It allows you to generate more ideas. What you really will experience is the variety of ideas. Just like if I told you to innovate a cup, you're probably not going to say, oh, we're going to make it out of a sponge. Would not be something that would naturally come out of that. But when you describe it as the function of carrying liquid, sponge becomes a viable idea. So by focusing on a function approach, you generate a much more diverse set of ideas and ideas that could potentially be those breakthroughs that people just never would have expected. I would love to hear the ideas you came up with using this function-based innovation approach. You can post them over at theinnovators.community. As we wrap up today's show, I want to remind you the show notes are over at killerinnovations.com. Again, visit the community. Join me over there. That's where I hang out. It's theinnovators.community. Can you help us out? We depend on our sponsors to help cover the cost. Look, this is not a moneymaker for us. It never has been for the 15 years. But to get our expenses covered is a big help. We now have a small staff. Can you just reach out to our sponsors and just say, hey, thanks for sponsoring the show? They would love to hear it. Also, can you pay it forward? We started this show 15 years ago as a way to pay it forward to Bob Davis, my mentor. All I ask is that you pay it forward by sharing this show with others who you think can benefit. And let me know where you're listening to the show. If you're listening to this on the radio, can you drop me a note? Let me know what station you're listening to this on. If you're listening to it as a podcast, can you tell me where you're listening to it at? Is it Apple, Google, iHeart, Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever you may be getting that? I would really appreciate it. Phil at killerinnovations.com. Thanks for your time today. Greatly appreciate it. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.